you have a memory of your first encounters with Charlie Parker's music? I do and I don't. I do in the sense that I was raised listening to Charlie Parker's music. My father was a huge jazz fan, and he had a lot of records in the house, and one of them, well, two of them actually were by Charlie Parker. One was called the Charlie Parker Memorial Album. I guess it was released after he had died. And it contained kind of a collection of different stuff by Parker, which my father played and pointed out certain things to me, particular tracks that he liked a lot. And then the other one was called Bird and Days. It was recorded in Birdland in a live recording in 1952, I think, maybe 53. And it's from a radio broadcast, and that is just incredible. I still listen to it, and I know every note of it because I heard it ever since I can remember. So I've been listening to it for over 60 years now at this point. So I'm saying I remember growing up with Parker, but I don't remember the first time I ever heard one of his recordings because it goes way back into my childhood. So at some point I heard it for the first time. But the point is, I suppose I spent my childhood hearing Parker's music. How do you think Parker's music has influenced jazz in Ireland or Europe and you as a musician? Well, you have to remember that Parker really is inescapable for any jazz musician of any nationality, of any part of the world, of any time. He revolutionized music along with others like Dizzy Gillespie and the bebop movement in general, but him in particular. And you really have to look at jazz in terms of pre-Charlie Parker and post-Charlie Parker. In the sense, the bebop movement is the beginning of the modern era. It's a bit like in classical music. You could say Bach, after Bach, you're in the modern era, and before Bach, you're in the early music era. And in jazz, before Parker, you're in the swing era, and before that, the traditional jazz era of Louis Armstrong and New Orleans and all of that. But after Parker, a huge amount of the vocabulary that we know, that everybody plays and everybody learns, was created by him and his colleagues at that time in a short period of like 5 or 6 years. They revolutionized music, and it's hard to kind of understand that, just how revolutionary it was from this distance, but it really was. And what happened was they established a whole new vocabulary of music, and older players became kind of, I won't say obsolete because that's not the right expression, but they were suddenly, from being giants on their own terms, they found that they couldn't play this new music because it was a new language. And some of them got very annoyed about it. I mean, Louis Armstrong described it at one point as being Chinese music. So that'll give you an idea of how big a kind of a challenge it was to people, even giants like Armstrong, to hear guys playing like this. They were a bunch of young men, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, Max Roach, a bunch of young men coming up with a new language that changed the world of music. And it didn't just change the world of jazz, it changed the world of music. They brought in a way of playing and a way of being, and even a kind of a persona that had not existed before they came along. So whether it was hugely influential in Ireland, but then again it was hugely influential in Japan, in America, and in Europe, of course, everybody wanted to play like that. That became the common language. Bebop, and after bebop, became the common language. So incredibly influential. Could you tell us a bit about the inception of the Bird album as original creation? Yes, I wanted to make an album dedicated to Charlie Parker, whom I'd been listening to an awful lot, and I do this every now and again, where of course his music is always present for me, but every now and again I'll go on a kind of a binge, a bit like a Netflix binge watching. I'll do a Charlie Parker binge listening thing. And I think it was after one of those I decided I'd really like to make an album in tribute to him. But I decided I didn't want to try and make an album that would sound try to sound like him, because for a start, you're never going to sound good if you do that. If you try and be Charlie Parker, there's only going to be one winner, and it's not you. So what I decided I would like to do was to make an album that would be a tribute to him, and the music would be all rearranged to some degree by me, sometimes more arranged than others. And it would be music that was either dedicated to him, made famous by him, or written by him. And I also wrote one piece of my own dedicated to him on that. So that's how it came about. I think I had a binge listening session, and I decided I would really like to record a tribute to him that at the same time would be kind of my viewpoint of what his music meant to me, rather than me trying to sound like him. What elements of Parker's playing style do you think create such a distinctive voice and influence on other musicians? Well, this is a huge. It can get quite technical, but it's a huge answer. It would be a huge answer if I was to go into it. Rhythmically, particularly, he changed the world of playing. His playing, it was influenced definitely by Lester Young before him, and harmonically probably by Art Tatum. But the sheer speed that he could play at and the virtuosity and all of that was unprecedented. And suddenly people had to up their game in terms of the technical playing of the instrument. And then he had this other harmonic language that he developed himself, an ability to move around the harmony in a way that had never been done before. And this is huge as well. So they're the biggest things. The rhythmic way of playing, the virtuosity of the playing, and the harmonic language. So melody, harmony and rhythm, how about that for being all-encompassing in terms of influence? Looking back from a 20-year distance of the Bird album, how do you feel about the music now? I'm very happy with it, actually. I think we did a really great job in terms of the playing. We had a tour. What happened was we did a Music Network tour, and so we toured the music for, I don't know, we had 10 gigs maybe. It was amazing those days, especially in these days when we've no gigs, but we had a 10 gig tour, I think it was. So by the time we got to the studio, we were very comfortable with the material, and we did I think a fine job of representing where we were at with the music at that point. It was very nicely recorded in Paul Ash Brown's late lamented studio in Ringsend, and it was really fun to do. And of course, working with such great musicians, Rick Peckham, Julian Arguelles and Tom Rainey, a real dream team for me at that time, was very special. So when I listened back to it, and I've just listened back to it again recently once I knew we were going to do this, I have to say it still sounds fresh to me 20 years later, and it's still one of the things that I'm most happy with in terms of my own recordings.